I would like to pass the floor to another speaker, Mr. Luc Hendricks, General Director of ECTA. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, honorable members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, the representative of Huawei. Thank you for inviting me here this evening to speak on international digital cooperation, building on each continent's strengths for the development of European digital sovereignty. When preparing for my intervention, my first thought I had were to narrow what is actually meant by European digital sovereignty, as this concept is multidimensional and is quite broad for a 5-minute keynote. Hence, I had to make some choices, and I will limit my intervention to 4 key messages. I started to Google the words digital sovereignty. Now, you will probably think that to illustrate European sovereignty, this is not the best example. I would not disagree. So instead of Google, I turned to Bing. I see also some smiles in the room, and indeed, it did not make a huge difference. Well, I can tell you, I also used DuckDuckGo to address privacy concerns. Although DuckDuckGo is too vested in the US, and some of you might continue to argue. My solution? I eventually used Qwant. What does this tell us? As a citizen, I make some choices to exercise my sovereignty. On the individual level, digital sovereignty has to do with individuals owning their data and controlling its use. Taking care of your data means treating them with sovereignty. That was my first message. In the EU, we are united by the values of enlightenment and humanism. These values include a commitment to the dignity of human beings, freedom, equality, and solidarity. Those values underpin our laws. The European Cybersecurity Act, the Network and Information Security Directive, the e-Privacy Directive, and the General Data Protection Regulation are solid assets of European digital sovereignty. They provide us with a European regulatory framework that is suited to improve the security of personal data and extend that sovereignty principle around the world, notably when it requires foreign dealers in European data to comply with this framework, with GDPR, for example. Hence, the power of the European market, given its size, should not be underestimated, and our values should be at the core of European international collaboration. Free trade is part of it. However, respect of the rule of law, including intellectual property, data and privacy, based on clear evidence, as well as fair competition, so the level playing field, should guard our trade agreements. Building walls for a European fortress is probably not the solution, but does not prevent us from thinking about how to make values and commerce intersect. This was my second message. As I just illustrated, it is important to have choice, and therefore, it is important to maintain a sufficient level of competition at all levels of the value or supply chain, even more when the supply chain has globalized. The EU veto on the merger Siemens-Alstom earlier this year has fueled a long-running debate over whether the EU antitrust rules needs to be updated. And we often hear that Europe needs European champions, telecom champions, digital champions, etc., etc. At ECTA, we do not agree with that. We strongly believe in the societal benefits of competition. When commenting on the Siemens-Alstom case, Mrs. Vestager said, without sufficient remedies, this merger would have resulted in higher prices for the signaling system that keep passengers safe and for the next generation of very high-speed trains. Indeed, and I would stress that competition not only has provided lower prices, improved quality and efficiency, but it has also been the fundamental driver of innovation, the driver that forces market players to continue to improve. And don't we all want to see our children pulled upwards in the classroom? This was my third message. Also, let's not forget that most of the biggest tech companies, such as Microsoft, Amazon, Apple or Google, just to mention some, have grown from startups, entrepreneurs that had an idea, vision, and took the risk to put their own money on it. Also, let's not forget that for anyone's success, there are probably hundreds of failures, not one that no one speaks out. So we better act to stimulate a real risk-based European entrepreneurial culture. Well, failure is not a stigma, and when venture capital and global complementary assets are easily accessible to European ICT businesses and startups. Entrepreneurs, those that take risks with their money, those are the champions we should promote. And indeed, we need many more of those. We need to stimulate the appetite of our youth for entrepreneurship. This was my last message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Acum o să avem o sesiune.
We now begin our Q&A session.
I'm Renaud Girard from Le Figaro. It's a French newspaper. I will ask my question in English so that everybody can understand. The question is from Mr. Liu, but also for other speakers. You have seen that Huawei is on a blacklist in America, and you have recently nine more technological Chinese firms which have been put on a blacklist in America. Are we today heading towards a technological partition of the world, the whole world, with, let's say, America and NATO countries on one side, and maybe China, Africa, and so on the other side? So my question is for everybody, and do you think that this technological partition of the world is good or bad for the European citizens that we are? Thank you.
So, thank you. So, as the Director General of ECTA, the European Competitive Telecommunication Association, I hear my voice in English. We represent the alternative operators in Europe, and if I would answer in this way. At the beginning of my career, almost 30 years ago, I worked for a small French company designing telecom equipment that was specialized in protocol conversion, so making systems from different languages to communicate together. And every time you try to create interoperability between one system and another, you lose some functionalities. And if we look at over the 20 years, we have had great benefits from systems and from standardization. Certainly, standardization of 3G is something, and GSM is a really big success story. So at one point, if we would divide, I'm not sure that we would create positive benefits for the European population. The second thing is that, as I said, within all the value chain and the supply chain that is today globalized, so it's a global economy. It's not only European companies buying from other parts of having part of their supply chain outsourced in other parts of the world, it's also very important for the industrial parties in Europe to be able to sell to the rest of the world. And our commercial balance, I think, is quite positive in some areas of the world. And on that, it's very important for the welfare to maintain competition in all the elements of the value chain. Because at the moment that you will reduce competition in one of the elements of the value chain, you will decrease quality, you will increase prices, and you will impact innovation. And as Mr. Liu said, and I would agree with this metaphor, 5G is a tree, the benefit of 5G is the forest. And what is and outside from the industrial perspective, it's very important for all the European sectors to achieve a smooth and a quick digital transformation. And for that, if you have a choice and if you are in another sector and you need to buy complementary resources from the telecom side, for example, you want to have the best available on the market. And when the best is available on the market, the parties that offer that will make sure that they can compete. It's what I said in my keynote introduction. Don't we want our children, when they are at the class, to be pulled up? We want to leverage to the better and not to the lower. And so having a diversified offer from product and services, from a diversity of provider, is key to release the innovation potential in all the sectors of the European economy. And that is, in our view, what is at stake. And that is, from a NECTA perspective, why we believe that competition in the telecom side is so important.
So thank you for this debate, which is indeed very needed, and I believe it's very useful. As technology develops and we see technological advancement, and I believe a lot about the importance of moving along with technology, also a lot of concerns rise. And yes, this is very natural when there are new things coming up, when there's change coming up. Always people ask questions and have concerns. And the only method we should address those concerns are with debating, with answering, with clearing and clarifying, and not by shunning opportunities. And with this respect, I wanted to ask about a recent NIS cooperation group report assessing the cybersecurity of 5G networks, which mentions among threats and threat actors, state actors or state-backed actors, which can potentially endanger 5G networks driven by political motivations. For this reason, I would like to ask how companies like Huawei and how other stakeholders could introduce measures to mitigate the risk of third countries on its business operations in Europe, and how we could put the citizens and the enterprises' mind and the stakeholders' mind at rest that this threat will not materialize. Thank you.
You try one answer? For balance, because it's not possible only one speaker.
You know that there is a cybersecurity act, the certification and so on is something very important, and I think we really need to work on that. And what I believe on it is that we really need to look at it from a factual base. And that's what I would like to add is that now we have our members, and so the telecom operators have to roll out and make major investment to roll out 5G networks. There is a lot of pressure from that. Some of them already begin to pay huge amount of money for spectrum and so on. And we need to make sure that we clear as quickly as possible this uncertainty, because this uncertainty is very bad for the investment. And if from Europe we want to stay competitive at the global level, we need to make sure that we do not introduce delays that are not justified or that will not be based on facts. And I believe that's very, very important. Okay? And do not forget, our members, or all the operators in Europe, they have to invest a lot. And this uncertainty is very bad for the investment.
Thank you. Mulțumesc mult.
Thank you very much to the speakers. And I now invite them to go back to their seats because we will have now the guests from the other panel that